I don't watch football. Not that it matters, but I like Andrew Luck now.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Beeble. Another team preview podcast coming for you today. We're looking at the Brooklyn Nets. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. To talk about this new look Nets team, I am joined by one of the hosts of the Locked On Nets podcast. Josh Bass is here to talk with me. Josh, welcome to the show.
Josh, thanks for having me. I'm a big fantasy basketball player, and even though we're in a full fantasy football swing, I'm still gearing up for a couple months from now when drafts are really going to get kicked into gear.
Yeah, well, fantasy basketball never stops over here at the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. Josh, you know that. Let's talk Brooklyn Nets. I start all these podcasts by looking at injury updates. Of course, there is a big one here. Will Kevin Durant play this regular season?
You know, if I had to guess, I would say no. Maybe there's a slight possibility he comes back in April, can get maybe 5 to 7 games under his belt before the playoffs kick into gear. But, the Nets are a very conservative team with injuries in general in the Sean Marks era. And that's going to be especially cautious when you're dealing with someone like Kevin Durant, who one of the greatest players of all time, coming off such a devastating industry. Obviously, a lot of scrutiny on the way Golden State handled that, even though I think most people know that they didn't do anything wrong, and it was really up to Durant if he wanted to play. But with such a valuable asset, the Nets are really looking in the future. How is this going to look the year after this, the final year on Kevin Durant's contract? Those 2 years are going to be the crucial years. I don't think he's going to play this year, if at all. He gets a couple games in maybe, but I don't think it's enough for you to warrant really stashing him on a roster all year.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason to me that you draft Kevin Durant in anything outside of dynasty formats, and even if it's in a dynasty format, I think we have to brace for the fact that Kevin Durant's going to be pretty much 32 years old when he plays an NBA game again. Well, he's going to be 32 when he plays an NBA game again. Coming off an Achilles injury, he will still be good, I think. I feel pretty confident saying that. Will he still be that top 5, top 4 fantasy type of guy? I have significant doubts that he's going to be at that level. So I think you should be valuing him more as a second rounder type of a player now at the age of 32, coming off an Achilles injury when he returns in 2020, 2021.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. He's someone that with his size and his gracefulness and just shooting ability, I think he's gonna age very well if he can stay healthy. But just given the severe injury he has, he's definitely gonna lose a bit of quickness and explosiveness. So I don't think he's gonna come back to the league when he does next year or at the end of this year and be a top 5 guy anymore, unfortunately.
Let's talk about the other big addition who is going to play this season. Kyrie Irving joins the Brooklyn Nets, coming across from the Boston Celtics. I think Kyrie is in for an absolutely massive year. Last year, he was the 11th ranked player in fantasy, 15th the year before, and now he heads to Brooklyn. I think he's a top 10 player this season. The difference to me is that while Brooklyn was still a playoff team last year, the offensive options that are going to be around him are going to be reduced in comparison to Boston. I think he's going to put up probably one of the best seasons of his career and go back to being a top 10 guy, which he has been once before. Do you see that? Do you see him taking a step forward on his numbers from last year?
Yeah, I definitely do, and especially the Nets point guard system is so point guard friendly. I mean, look at the usage that D'Angelo Russell had last year. I think he had a 32% usage rate and put up just gaudy numbers. And obviously, Kyrie might not be the pure passer D'Lo is, but from a scoring standpoint, at all levels, 3-pointers, deadly mid-range game, getting to the basket. He's just going to be a huge upgrade. And the way that the Nets lineup looks like this year, it's going to be mainly Taurean Prince and Rhodey Crooks kind of playing most minutes at the 4. Prince is a solid 3-point shooter, as we know. Crooks is someone that has potential with his shot. I think it's going to develop better over the years, but there should basically be a 4-out system, and you have a really dynamic role guy in Jarrett Allen, who's going to be the starter. DeAndre as the backup. And that's actually an interesting thing for Kyrie because he didn't really have that with Boston. Al Horford, phenomenal player, much better than both Jarrett Allen or DeAndre Jordan, but someone that likes to play on the perimeter more. So I think Kyrie's going to have a lot more assist opportunities. He's going to have a dynamic lob man going to the rim. And then scoring wise, I mean, we saw how great he came out in his first year in Boston, that 17-18 season. He came out gangbusters, and I think he's just going to kill it to start the season. I'd be shocked if he scores less than the 24 points or so he averaged, and I think he's going to be extremely efficient as well this year.
Yeah, same. He's ranked 19th on ESPN and has an ADP of 19 on Fantrax. That is nonsense to me. He was the 11th best player last year, and I think he pushes into that top 10. A huge season. Look, we talk about the usage that Russell had. If he gets that same usage, he is so much better in terms of efficiency that his numbers are going to be absolutely through the roof, Kyrie. I'm looking for a really, really big season for Kyrie Irving for this coming year. Let's talk about the guy who, at the time of us recording this a couple of days ago, just signed an extension on his contract, 3 years extra for Caris LeVert. LeVert was the best player on this Nets team before his injury. Russell took over that mantle as the season went on, and then when he came back, he wasn't quite the same. But Josh, I think it's important to note that in the playoffs, when some fantasy basketball people aren't paying as much attention to the numbers, LeVert looked more like that guy we saw in October.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Caris was great against Philly and a very stout defensive team in that, but he was explosive getting to the basket. He was hitting his three-point shot. I mean, I think for Caris, the three-pointer is always going to be a big swing skill. It's been extremely inconsistent in his first few seasons in the league. He hasn't really improved that much on that. His touch is good, but the problem is he rushes his shot so much, and he's really going to need to prove that he can be consistent with his form until I really think that he's going to make a leap with his three-pointer. But he has all the tools to put it together. And I think for him, it'll be interesting to see how he does this year, because when the Nets had D'Lo, Kyrie, and Spencer Dinwiddie, at any given night, those guys could be ordered 1, 2, and 3 in terms of who was going to be the main guy, who was going to be the secondary, and who just wasn't going to have that good of a night. With Kyrie Irving in the mix, someone who is a perennial all-star, a champion in this league, he is always going to be that top guy. And now it's kind of left for Spencer Dinwiddie and Caris LeVert for fight for that number 2. And for someone like Caris, who isn't as good of a shooter, I'm not sure how good of a season he's going to have. I think he's going to really outperform the contract he just got. I think that was an absolute steal for the Nets. But just due to some of his lack of consistency on the offensive end, his percentages are never going to be phenomenal. He might have limited opportunities in terms of being a distributor. I think he's going to be a good player this year, but probably someone that's going to be overvalued in most fantasy drafts. I don't know how you feel about that.
Look, he's ranked 88th on Yahoo and 120th on ESPN, so I think he probably falls in between those two. I think 120 is too low, but last year his numbers, his overall rank was 162nd in only those 27 minutes a night. Now I think those minutes are going to rise up pretty significantly this season, and he's going to be playing in excess of 30 minutes a night. But there is that concern with the assist numbers that were, they were quite good at the end of last season, but how's that going to go? But the percentages are, of course, the biggest concern for LeVert. Good three-point shooter at Michigan, but has waxed and waned in the NBA. The free throws, the overall field goal percentage, they're the concerns. To me, he's fine as a later round pick, but I don't think we should be expecting, like at the beginning of last season, he was a top 50 guy in that first month of the season. I don't think that is a sustainable level for LeVert, especially with Irving around. I worry a bit for his long-term value as well, just with Durant returning next season as well, dynasty-wise. But again, I talk about this quite a bit, is that rosters don't stay the same very much at all. So he could be on a different team in a year's time because another trade's happened, Durant gets traded. Who knows? Any sort of thing can happen. So you look at him, but I don't think he's probably pushing ever to be a top 40 guy with all those efficiency deficiencies that he does have. You dropped that in just earlier without me mentioning it, but you said that Jarrett Allen is the starter on this team. You think that's a definite? Because there are plenty of people, and some of the people doing the ranks at some of these sites, including ESPN, where they've got DeAndre Jordan laughably ranked at number 38. They think he might be the starter. I think it would be nonsense to have Jordan as the starter, but how confident are you that Jarrett Allen is that guy?
I'm never going to say anything with 100% certainty, but I'm pretty confident Allen will be the starter. I think if KD was healthy this year, things would be a little bit different. But just because the Nets know they're not going to contend for a championship this year, if they make it out of the first round of the playoffs, that would be a good season for them, given everything that's going on. I think they're going to spend a lot more time on Jarrett Allen's development. And DeAndre is a guy that, listen, with his age, he's 31 years old right now. He has a lot of minutes on him. His productivity has definitely decreased in recent years. I think he's someone that they want to limit his minutes to, and they can spin the story to him basically saying, backup, you're still going to be playing upwards of 20 minutes a night, probably something where Jarrett Allen's maybe getting 26 or so minutes, DeAndre's getting 22, and that will help keep you fresh. That will keep you productive. You're not playing with any stiff. You're playing with Spencer Dinwiddie, who's one of the top backup point guards in the game, if not the best. So you'll have plenty of opportunity, but just given where we are as a franchise this year alone, it makes sense for Jarrett Allen to be the starter. And obviously, from a talent perspective, Allen is clearly better.
I think that Allen will be the starter as well. I think he'll be in that 26-minute mark where he was last season. So that literally limits his overall upside value, I guess, in fantasy leagues. He's strong as a later round guy, but I don't understand the ESPN rankings. They've got DeAndre Jordan 38th and Jarrett Allen 64th, and I think neither of those guys even approach those numbers. I don't see how they could both possibly do that. That just seems absolutely ludicrous. Allen did show some flashes last season, but even with Ed Davis behind him, he got limited in terms of playing time, and I'm not sure with Jordan around that's necessarily going to creep up. So I think he's fine as a later round guy, but I don't think that any sort of big breakout is necessarily coming forward. Jarrett Allen, we've touched on DeAndre Jordan. I don't think we should be looking at him in any sort of fantasy format. He's still ranked too high on Yahoo and ESPN, as I mentioned. Both of those, well, Yahoo's got him inside the top 100 and ESPN inside the top 50. And the minutes just aren't going to be there for Jordan to get anywhere near that level. And he is 31 years of age, so significant decline defensively. His block rate has evaporated over the last couple of years. It would be pretty foolish, I think, to look at Jordan anywhere near those sort of levels. But let's talk now about a guy who you mentioned as well, who could be the starter at power forward. My man, Rowdy Rodion's Kurucs. Do you think he's going to get that spot over Taurean Prince?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I love Kurucs as much as anyone. He was one of my favorite players to watch last year. He's an absolute ball of energy. He can do a lot of things on the court, and for someone that came in as a second-round rookie, blasted through any expectations that were there for him, and frankly, there wasn't. Of being a good one. And I think from a three-point shooting standpoint and spacing the floor, he's someone that has shown that he can be a very, very reliable three-point shooter in the league. 39% last year, 38.5% the year before on a good volume of attempts. So especially when you have someone, Jarrett Allen at the center position who's not going to be able to shoot, LeVert at one of the wing spots, he's a very consistent shooter. You want to have that guy in there that you know is going to be able to knock down shots alongside Kyrie and Joe Harris. And I think that's Taurean Prince. And I think Kurucs is going to be able to play a lot this year. But just even though he did get a lot stronger in the offseason, I don't think Kenny Atkinson wants to wear him down by having him start at the 4 for basically upwards of 80 games. So I think Taurean Prince will probably be the starter just due to his track record. And obviously Kenny, even though they didn't necessarily overlap in Atlanta, probably does have some familiarity with him. And I think Taurean Prince is going to come in. He's someone that Nets brass has been talking up very highly this year. They're both going to have a large amount of playing time, but ultimately Taurean Prince, I'd be shocked if he wasn't the starter.
Interesting. I thought that they'd go with Kurucs there in that spot, but I had them both playing a similar amount of minutes in that sort of 25 to 27 minute a night range. I don't think that Prince is coming in and being a 32 minute a night guy that he was in Atlanta, and definitely won't have the same offensive role that he had in Atlanta. So that's going to limit both of these guys' overall value. I think if you're looking at a guy, Prince probably has a higher upside as a player to take in a last round or second last round in a fantasy draft. Kurucs more of a deeper league guy, but do you see them playing in a similar minute range? It won't be like a 32-16 minute split between those guys.
Definitely not. I'd say I think 28 for Prince sounds right, and even for Kurucs, I think he could get upwards of 25 and 28 because these two could definitely both play together at the forward position. And you look at the Nets rotation right now, there's 8 guys that are definitely going to be playing significant minutes. That's Jarrett Allen, DeAndre Jordan, kind of splitting the 5 minutes, Rowdy Kurucs, Taurean Prince, Kyrie, Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, and Joe Harris. But those are the kind of the core 8 guys, and there's a lot of opportunity for others to join them. But I think Kenny Atkinson is really going to ride those core 8 and throw a lot of different combinations out there. All 8 of those guys will probably get at least 22 minutes a night, and DeAndre Jordan being the lowest of that. So I think especially capable wings that can theoretically play both ends of the court, like Kurucs and Taurean Prince, those guys are going to see plenty of minutes.
Yeah, that's exactly how I have those minutes going as well. The final 2 spots in the rotation are interesting. They brought in Garrett Temple and Wilson Chandler this season. Let's start with Temple. Do you think he's going to handle that backup shooting guard role?
Yeah, I think Temple probably will, just because he's someone that you know what you're going to get from him. He's a very, very reliable defender, solid. He's not the quickest guy, but at 33 years of age, he's very stout. He's a smart defender, and I think Kenny Atkinson really wants people that can just go in and play reliable defense. And we saw that with Travion Graham last year. Even though he could not hit a shot to save his life, especially in the playoffs, he was still getting thrown out there and getting minutes. So I see Temple filling that spot. Ultimately, his track record as a three-point shooter is a bit better. Struggled with the Clippers last year, but had some really nice years in Sacramento. And this part of the season that he played with Memphis last year was shooting the three ball okay. So I think he can definitely be more of a plus offensively than a guy like Travion Graham was. And I'd be shocked if Kenny didn't go to him just to kind of provide 15 minutes a night in that stable vet type role.
And what about Wilson Chandler, the other guy, old baby neck that they brought in there? Do you think that he is going to force his role away? I think it'll be a limited role. Or do you think that there's a chance someone like Janan Musa could come in and be that 10th guy?
Yeah, I think Wilson Chandler will definitely get the first crack at it, just because he is a veteran. He has a pretty good reputation in the league, even though he's really slipped in recent years. Yeah. I always like Wilson Chandler on the Knicks in Denver, because he's someone that could get buckets. Even though it wasn't always the most efficient, he was a good scorer. But when you look at this Nets team, that's not really what they need. They need someone who's more better served as a spot-up three-point shooter. And Chandler can do that, but he's a bit inconsistent. And just given the injuries that have sapped basically all of his athleticism over the years, I'd be shocked. I think he's going to get the first crack, but I don't think he's going to stay in it for long. Musa is someone that has a lot more potential, because he can score the basketball. He's a pretty good shooter. He can create, run pick and roll, good passer, has the size. But the question mark for him has always been his defense and his athleticism. And I think he's clearly, he's in the bottom quartile of NBA athletes. That's no question. He's never going to get out of that, really. But can he be kind of schemed around by these other Nets players to really warrant him being out there? Because his offense can be good. It just really depends on what Kenny wants to go to. I think he's going to lean towards people that might be steadier defensively, like a Garrett Temple. But if Nets need punch, let's say one of their guys like LeVert or Dinwiddie go down for an extended period of time, I wouldn't be shocked if Musa gets trotted out there for 20 minutes a night, just seeing if he can make something happen with his offensive acumen.
He's a very interesting fantasy prospect long term. Now, whether he gets those minutes at any point this season or in the future remains to be seen. But he's someone that I'm always wanting to keep an eye on, to see how he develops, to see where his role goes. But let's talk about someone who actually does have a solid role this season, and that is Smokin' Joe Harris, Team USA's own Joe Harris, who does what he does, and that's come in, he bangs in threes, he doesn't do too much else. Aside from that, he hit threes at an astonishing rate last season. I don't really see any reason for what he does changing this season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. His role is going to be the exact same. The thing for Joe Harris has always been, he's always been a very good three-point shooter, but he took it to a whole other level last year.
It was crazy.
Shooting an insane 47% on threes. His volume isn't incredible. For someone who's that good of a shooter, you'd actually like to see his volume be a bit more. Shot basically 5 threes a game last year in 30 minutes. I just can't say with good faith that his three-point percentage is going to stay the same at 47%.
It's high.
Yeah, it's high. There's nowhere to go but down, unfortunately. But even if it kind of does settle into more of a 42 to 43% role, he's still a very efficient player. His 2-point percentage actually decreased last year, even though he was very effective going to the basket. He's really, really smart at kind of leaning into the pass to give himself an extra half step on the defender. When you have Joe Harris's athleticism, even though he's sneaky, quick, and definitely very strong, you need every half step you can get. But his 2-point percentage went down from 59 to 53% last year, and I could definitely see that normalizing a bit. So if his 2-point percentage goes up a little, 3-point percentage goes down a little, when you look at it at the end of the day, you're still going to have someone who's an extremely efficient fantasy player, not going to turn the ball over too much, and definitely can give you a lot of good for someone that won't be pretty hyped, I'm assuming.
Yeah, he's just an interesting guy that you can add more for, say, 14-team leagues, but as a 3-point stream option provides obviously a ton of those and does it efficiently, but then very lacking in those other areas, and very little is going to change with him. I also don't think that much is going to change with Spencer Dinwiddie this season, who is going to play that backup point guard role, as you mentioned, one of the best point guards in the league. Now, he is a guy whose shooting is sort of all over the place. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but he's going to do what he does in terms of passing and scoring. But his last season was a little bit different to the year before. We saw some changes there. Is there any difference with Kyrie replacing D'Angelo Russell? Do you think that means, and there were times when Kenny Atkinson would bench Russell for Dinwiddie, that just doesn't seem like it's going to be something that happens this year, though.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, but I think that they definitely can play together. But Kyrie's just an absolutely lethal shooter, and not to say that D'Angelo wasn't. D'Angelo had a great year shooting the basketball last year, but I could definitely see Spencer and Kyrie playing off each other much better because Spencer is someone that loves to have the ball in his hands. D'Angelo does as well, likes to hold it for a long time. And I think even though Kyrie's in a similar ilk as those two, it's almost like getting to start anew. So where it's clearly that Kyrie's the main guy, Spencer's going to be the secondary option. But I think that they can play off each other where Dinwiddie can have a great year. And he's one of my favorite players to watch just because he can be so explosive going to the basket. He takes a lot of ill-advised threes, which really decreases his three-point percentage. But I think he's someone that can be a very explosive offensive player, can go for 30 any night. He's deadly from the corners. I mean, he shot 40% from three in the corners last year. The problem is that when he just gets into this mode of taking all these insane step-back threes, and I think having Kyrie there to keep him in check, be like, hey, listen, I'm a long-time all-star in this league, a champion. Let's default to me. And in some cases, just because of the D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie relationship on the court, they couldn't do that. There was always that awkward push and pull. Who's going to be the guy? Is D'Lo going to get benched for Spencer this game, as you mentioned? But I think Dinwiddie's role is very, very stable this year, being that sixth man that can go for lightning in a bottle any game. And I think he's going to have a really great season and could be someone that wins sixth man of the year.
Yeah, he's absolutely in play for Dinwiddie. We know how good he can be. He does have limits for fantasy. Sometimes that poor field goal percentage, really poor rebounder as well, and doesn't generate any defensive numbers. And that cap on minutes with Kyrie there does limit him to a later round pick in those 10, 11, probably 11th and 12th round sort of a style. But getting those assists from him late can be really key. He's useful in that area. The Nets didn't have much in terms of the NBA draft in 2019, Josh, but they did add Nick Claxton, who showed something in Summer League. I thought he's obviously got a long way to go. We're not going to be seeing too much of him this season, are we?
No, you'll be seeing a lot of Nick Claxton in the G League, and if you're playing in a G League fantasy league, then he can put up huge stats for you. But he's just way too raw at this point. Someone who does have an intriguing skill set, given that he's 7 feet tall. But also has the ability to bring the ball up the court, even though his numbers from the 3-point line look pretty bad. His shot can look decent at times. His touch is pretty good. So he is an interesting long-term option as someone that can develop into a nice fantasy player. But this year, he's just not going to get any minutes, especially behind Jarrett Allen and DeAndre Jordan, and just is way too raw, even if the opportunity did arise for him.
For people in deeper leagues, they probably want to just pay attention to someone by the name of Theo Pinson, who had some moments last season. What sort of player is Pinson for people in deeper leagues?
Yeah, Pinson's an interesting guy. He's kind of like a 6'6" Swiss Army knife. He played point guard in college for UNC, even though they might have had a smaller guy on the court. He was someone that was going to be initiating the offense. He's a really good passer. The problem from him is that his three-point shot just needs a lot of work. His handle's not there. So even though in the G League he might be one of the primary creators for the Long Island Nets, his role on the big team will be someone who's more of a slasher, can get a good amount of assists for a wing, can generate some defensive numbers, both steals and blocks. So interesting long-term player to track. But this year, just given his complete inability on the offensive end to play a consistent role, he's not going to be getting much minutes unless things go catastrophically wrong in Brooklyn.
The last guy we touch on here, I think a player who has a chance to be a regular rotation player, and that's David Nwaba. Do you think there is a chance that he could take Wilson Chandler or Garrett Temple's role?
I definitely think that he can, because Nwaba is someone that fits that mold of defensive versatility that Kenny Atkinson's going to be looking for at the end of his bench. He is just so strong, can defend point guards, shooting guards, and even small forward as well. And especially when you look at defending point guards, that's going to be huge for the Nets because obviously Kyrie Irving, his strength is not on the defensive end. Dinwiddie has the tools, but his effort last year was horrible. So much so at times where D'Angelo Russell was actually a better defender than Dinwiddie was defending point guards. So especially going up against some of these high-powered point guards. If Kenny Atkinson needs a solution, it's either going to be David Nwaba or Theo Pinson. And Nwaba, he's bounced around the league a lot, but he is just a very, very exciting player to have. Tremendous rebounder, always making stuff happen on the defensive end of the court. Good slasher. He needs to just continue improving his three-point shot. If he could develop into at least a reliable 35% shooter on decent volume from three, he would be a rotation player, no doubt about it. But it's just the question mark, can he shoot the ball and score the ball well enough to garner minutes? But in terms of effort and fit on what Kenny Atkinson is going to be looking for in the second unit, Nwaba is someone that could definitely emerge.
Yeah, for deeper leagues, he is someone to watch in case he does take that role away from Chandler or Temple, because he can contribute in the defensive stats and in rebounding, and if the shooting comes along, there's something there for a deeper league guy. But that is really about it. We'll wrap this up now by just looking at some value picks. I think Kyrie, as I said, is ranked way too low on both ESPN and on Yahoo, 15th on Yahoo, and then DeAndre Jordan at 36 on ESPN is ridiculously high, and you shouldn't be drafting him there. Josh, tell us where they can find you over on social media and about what's happening with Locked On Nets.
Absolutely. Find us on at Locked On Nets on social media. Me personally, I'm at JMBass_. We are recapping the top 5 highlights of the Nets season last year. It's a lot of fun. It includes some Theo Pinson dancing. So please check it out at Locked On Nets. And Josh, thanks for having me on.
No problem, Josh. Thank you for coming on once again. And that'll wrap it up for today's show, guys. Make sure you're subscribing to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher as well. Go leave a 5-star rating. That would be excellent. And on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss an episode. Give a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Basketball Monster memberships are open, so go and check it out over there. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Wilson Chandler.